Japan entered the Pacific War convinced its air force could strike at will. For years, Japanese pilots trained in daring maneuvers, believing that speed and bravery would always break through. Early in the war, that belief held true. Dive bombers hit Pearl Harbor. Torpedo planes tore into Allied ships. American sailors looked skyward in fear. But by 1944, something changed. Suddenly, Japanese pilots were being torn from the sky, not by visible enemy fighters, but by explosions that seemed to come from nowhere. The Americans had quietly introduced a new weapon, radar-guided anti-aircraft guns powered by the revolutionary proximity fuse. Instead of relying on guesswork, these shells detonated automatically when close to a target. To Japanese airmen, it felt supernatural. A bomber flying at night might suddenly vanish in a burst of fire, as if the air itself had turned hostile. Even the kamikaze, pilots sworn to crash into American ships, found their paths ending in mid-air, destroyed before impact. Foreshadowing this shock was America's rapid advance in electronics. Engineers had miniaturized tiny radio transmitters into each fuse, making every shell smart enough to sense when a plane was near. At first, even U.S. officers doubted it would work. How could fragile electronics survive the violence of a shell launch? But by 1943, the answer roared across the Pacific. The fuse worked flawlessly, and Japanese aircraft began dropping in alarming numbers. For the Japanese, the experience was devastating. They had assumed that courage and sacrifice could always punch through. Now, entire formations were shredded before reaching American carriers. Radar stations tracked them from miles away, feeding data to gunners whose weapons no longer needed direct hits. Instead of lucky shots, nearly every barrage became lethal. Kamikaze pilots, once feared, now looked like sparks snuffed out in a storm. This wasn't just a tactical edge, it was a psychological hammer. Japanese commanders realized too late that technology, not bravery, would decide the war's future. The proximity fuse and radar-guided fire control turned the Pacific into a killing ground where the old rules no longer applied. By 1945, American fleets advanced almost without fear of air attack. What Japan thought was its strongest weapon, its pilots, had been broken by science. The lesson was brutal but clear. In modern war, courage alone cannot defeat innovation.